Is it hard to believe? In the heart of peak tourist season, the United States, once the world's most visited destination, now stands strangely quiet. At major international airports, the crowds are gone. No lines at check-in, no chatter in the immigration halls. Even the loudspeakers seem hesitant to speak because there's no one left to listen. Since July last year, 10 major international airlines have withdrawn from the US market. Iconic airports like LAX, JFK, and O'Hare are seeing up to 35% fewer international passengers, and entire routes have vanished quietly, without warning, without goodbye. Has America really fallen off the world's travel map? Once seen as a dream, now it's becoming a question mark. In today's video, we'll uncover why global travelers from Europe, Canada, Australia, and beyond are quietly turning their backs on the United States. It's not just about money or competition. It's about trust, safety, and whether America still feels like a place worth visiting. So stay with us. If you've ever felt that the country you knew is changing, if you've noticed empty airports or disappearing routes in your hometown, this story is yours too. Leave a comment below with the name of your city or airport. Let us know if something's changed in your travels. And don't forget to subscribe, because in this series, we go beyond headlines to bring you the untold stories behind the shifting maps of our world. Since July of last year, 10 major international airlines have completely withdrawn from the US market. Not scaled back, not paused, withdrawn. Vanished from booking systems with no formal announcements, no press releases, no farewells. Among them, play airlines of Iceland, Air Canada, Lufthansa, Air France and Jetstar. Each one stepping back from the country that once stood as the #1 destination for global travelers. Play Airlines may be the most telling case. The Icelandic budget airline made headlines just a few years ago for offering $99 flights from Reykjavik to Boston. It was a game changer, allowing a new generation of European travelers to experience the US affordably and easily. But in March 2025, without warning, all play flights to the US disappeared. Within months, Northern European tourism to the US plummeted by more than 60%, according to the US Travel Association. Why are they leaving? On the surface, it's easy to blame inflation, labor shortages, or the aftershocks of the pandemic. But beneath those explanations lies something more profound, a breakdown of trust, safety, and hospitality. A recent survey by the European Travel Commission found that 71% of travelers from Northern Europe now prefer to visit Canada or Japan instead of the US. Their reasons are not surprising concerns over public safety, social unrest, unpredictable border experiences, and the fear of unaffordable emergency healthcare. The United States was once seen as a dream destination. Now, many see it as a risk. An expensive, unpredictable gamble that doesn't always end well. Horror stories about travelers being detained for hours, treated with suspicion at customs, or encountering violence and homelessness right outside airport terminals have become too common. Tour guides in places like Reykjavik and Amsterdam are now quietly steering clients elsewhere, not out of politics, but out of concern. Airlines are businesses. They don't make emotional decisions. They follow demand. They invest in destinations that are stable, profitable, and well-regarded. In this environment, the United States no longer checks those boxes. Airport fees are among the highest in the world. Passenger taxes continue to rise. And for international visitors, the cost of travel insurance, especially to cover emergency medical services in the US, is often double what it is for Japan or much of Europe. In Canada, the warning signs are even more striking. Air Canada and WestJet, two giants of North American travel, have cut over 40% of their US-bound routes. Iconic cities like Orlando, Las Vegas, and Los Angeles are no longer must-visits for Canadian families. This is especially alarming given that winter travel from Canada to the US was once a cultural tradition. For decades, so-called snowbirds would escape the Canadian cold for the warmth of Florida, California, or Arizona. Not anymore. Bookings for US destinations from Canada dropped 53% this winter. Meanwhile, domestic Canadian tourism surged. Canadians are turning toward their own provinces, choosing Nova Scotia over New York, British Columbia over Beverly Hills. According to Destination Canada, this isn't just a seasonal hiccup. It's a nationwide shift in sentiment. Canadians are no longer avoiding the US because of cost alone. They're avoiding it because it feels unsafe, chaotic, and no longer worth the stress. One Ottawa family put it bluntly. We used to drive to New York City twice a year, but now, for the same price as a mid-range hotel in downtown LA, we can spend a peaceful weekend in Quebec. No sirens, no street tents, no surprises. The message is simple: safety is the new luxury, and the US no longer offers it. This isn't about politics or headlines, it's about experiences. Tourists want a trip that feels welcoming and worthwhile. They don't demand perfection, they expect consistency, comfort, and peace of mind. And that's what America seems to have lost. It's important to remember that visitors from Northern Europe and Canada don't just bring money, they bring loyalty. They are among the highest spending, most frequent return travelers in the world. They don't just visit once, they come back. They bring their families, they explore beyond the tourist zones, they support local economies. And when they stop coming, the impact ripples through every level of the tourism sector, from small-town diners to major hotels to state economies that rely on foreign visitors. So what does this mean for the future? If Iceland and Canada, two of the most peaceful and friendly nations in the world, are quietly backing away from the US, what comes next? What happens when Asia, with its booming middle class and growing appetite for international travel, also begins to retreat? That future is already taking shape. Up next, we'll turn to Australia, a country whose citizens once filled the beaches of California, the streets of Manhattan, and the gates of Disneyland. They were loyal, they were generous, and now they're leaving too. The world is not slamming the door on America, they're simply no longer knocking. Stay with us. For decades, Australians treated the United States like a dream destination. From the golden shores of California to the neon glow of Las Vegas, America represented freedom, excitement, and adventure. Families saved for years to walk through Disneyland. Young adults booked road trips through Route 66. Retirees planned bucket list cruises departing from Miami or Seattle. The connection felt personal, familiar, even loyal. But that connection is now fracturing quietly, yet dramatically. In the last 18 months, the number of Australian tourists travelling to the US has plunged by 67%. It's not just a slump, it's a mass shift in behaviour. And what's even more alarming is that it's happening without protest or outrage. Australians aren't making noise, they're just not coming. Jetstar, the largest low-cost airline in Australia, made headlines earlier this year when it announced the complete suspension of all its routes to the United States. That includes Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Honolulu. This isn't a seasonal cut. This is a full retreat. And it marks the first time in the airline's history that the United States has been completely wiped off its flight network. This is no small decision. The Sydney-Los Angeles route was once considered a symbolic link between the East and West, connecting two dynamic economies and two cultures with shared values. Now that link has gone silent. Why? According to Jetstar's CEO, the decision was based on a combination of soaring operational costs, inconsistent travel experiences, and rising concern from passengers. Landing fees in US airports have increased by 38%. Border processes have become more complex. And perhaps most damning of all, many customers reported feeling unwelcome, mistrusted, and unsafe when arriving on American soil. This is not just about dollars, it's about dignity, about how travelers are treated from the moment they land. Australian tourists, known for being polite, relaxed, and high spending, are increasingly choosing destinations that make them feel respected. According to a 2025 survey by Tourism Research Australia, 84% of senior travellers in Australia no longer consider the US a viable vacation option, citing healthcare risks, airport chaos, and cultural hostility as key reasons. In contrast, only 23% reported similar concerns about Japan, South Korea, or Vietnam. For older travellers, especially the US, has become a source of anxiety. A retired couple from Melbourne shared their story. We flew to LA in 2019. We were detained at the airport for 2 hours because of a passport issue that turned out to be a clerical error. No apology, no explanation. We left feeling like criminals, not guests. And we promised each other we'll never come back. Their experience is not unique. Travel agencies across Australia report a sharp decline in interest for US vacations. Instead, bookings to Asian destinations are booming. Japan and South Korea are seeing double-digit increases year over year. Even countries like Vietnam and Indonesia are becoming preferred alternatives. Not because they're closer, but because they offer something America no longer does: a sense of welcome, stability and peace. For many Australians, the decision is not just emotional, it's practical. The cost of visiting the US has become absurd. A family vacation to California can now easily cost 20–30% more than a comparable trip to Tokyo or Seoul. And while hotels in America charge inflated resort fees and parking surcharges, accommodations in Asia are becoming more luxurious, more efficient, and more transparent. More importantly, Asian airports and tourism hubs are rapidly adapting to international expectations. Multilingual staff, seamless transit, senior-friendly services. In contrast, many American airports are described as chaotic, understaffed, and lacking even basic accessibility for elderly or disabled travelers. And let's not ignore the elephant in the room: healthcare fear. One medical emergency in the US can financially destroy a foreign visitor. Even with insurance, the cost of an ambulance ride or a hospital visit can eclipse an entire vacation budget. For aging travelers, that's not just a risk, it's a deterrent. But perhaps the most telling sign of this retreat is how quiet it is. Australians aren't marching in protest. They aren't writing angry op-eds. They aren't launching boycott campaigns. They're simply closing the chapter silently. A population that once filled the departure lounges of Sydney and Melbourne with excitement for America has quietly rerouted its plans. The gates to America remain physically open, but emotionally, spiritually, they're closing, and the consequences will go far beyond lost airline revenue. Australian tourists contribute significantly to the American tourism economy, not just in major cities, but in smaller towns, national parks, and lesser-known coastal areas. They travel longer, spend more, and tend to revisit places they love. Losing them means losing not just dollars, but a certain kind of traveller. A visitor who appreciates culture, invests in local businesses, and often returns with family and friends. So what does this mean for America? It means that trust is not just eroding, it's evaporating, quietly, subtly, but completely. And once it's gone, it's incredibly hard to earn back. Because Australians don't need to argue, they don't need to explain. They just pack their bags, choose a different flight, and never look back. If the US can lose Australia, one of its most culturally aligned, economically stable, and historically friendly partners, who's next? What happens when the trend spreads to Asia, Latin America, or even domestic travellers? For over half a century, transatlantic flights were more than just air routes, they were lifelines. They connected the United States to the heart of Europe, linking economies, families, and cultures. Flying from Paris to New York or Frankfurt to Chicago once symbolized more than tourism. It represented shared values and mutual respect. But in 2025, that era is quietly fading. Europe, like Australia and Canada, is withdrawing. The numbers don't lie. In early 2025, both Lufthansa and Air France-KLM, the two flag carriers of Germany and France, announced major reductions in their US flight schedules. On paper, it looked like a restructuring. In reality, it was a statement. Between them, more than 30% to 45% of US-bound flights were cut, including routes to key cities like Chicago, Houston, Miami, and Atlanta. These cuts were not minor tweaks to optimize schedules. They were strategic shifts away from the United States and toward Asia. For the first time since World War II, Europe's most respected airlines have prioritized Tokyo, Seoul, Delhi, and Singapore over American destinations. New flights have been added, time slots optimized, resources moved, and America downgraded to an afterthought. Why this realignment? According to airline executives, the decision was driven by three primary forces: economic risk, social volatility, and deteriorating passenger experience in the US. Let's start with economics. While fuel prices and inflation are affecting airlines globally, the US has become one of the most expensive places to operate a flight. From high landing fees to increasing airport surcharges, the cost of keeping a route to America profitable has become nearly unsustainable. Additionally, the US dollar has fluctuated so significantly over the past 2 years that it's made long-term pricing models difficult to maintain, especially when competitors in Asia offer more stability. Then there's the issue of the customer experience, or rather, the decline of it. European travelers are reporting higher levels of dissatisfaction with US airports than ever before. Delays, strikes, long immigration lines, aggressive questioning at customs, and unpredictable transportation logistics have turned what was once an exciting journey into a stress-filled ordeal. A business-class passenger flying from Frankfurt to New York may pay thousands of dollars only to be met with chaotic terminals, untrained personnel, and a lingering sense of tension. A senior pilot at Air France recently told Le Monde, "I used to dream of flying routes to New York. Now when I'm assigned to Seoul or Tokyo, I breathe easier. Everything runs smoother. The passengers are happier. And the airports, they operate like 5-star hotels compared to what we're seeing in the US." This sentiment isn't limited to staff. A 2025 survey by the European Travel Index revealed that 52% of frequent European flyers now actively avoid the US, even when work or family once made it a default destination. Their top reasons: safety concerns, poor infrastructure, and a growing perception that America is no longer the hospitable, open country it once was. Lufthansa's chief strategy officer put it more bluntly in an interview with Süddeutsche Zeitung: "We are not abandoning America, but we are reprioritizing. We fly where the future is." And right now, that future isn't in the United States. That future, in their eyes, lies in Asia. The continent offers faster-growing middle classes, more government support for tourism, and modernized airport infrastructure. Flights are full. Passengers feel safe. Governments are eager to partner. In contrast, many US airports, especially those outside major hubs, are underfunded, understaffed, and increasingly disconnected from global travel patterns. The shift is already visible in the data. According to IATA, European passenger traffic to the US dropped 24% in 2024, while European flights to Asia hit their highest growth rate since 2011. Routes like Paris-Tokyo and Frankfurt-Delhi are now being prioritized for peak slots that once belonged to New York or Miami. But it's not just numbers that are changing, it's the narrative. Remember when flying to the US was a status symbol in Europe? A rite of passage for students, honeymooners, artists, and entrepreneurs. Those days are fading. Now conversations revolve around cancelled trips, delayed visas, unpleasant airport encounters and concerns about random violence in American cities. What America once symbolized opportunity-adventure connection is being replaced by caution, doubt, and hesitation. And it's not just tourists who feel this. European airlines are responding to the unspoken message from their passengers: we're not sure this is worth it anymore. And the consequences are far-reaching. These flight reductions aren't just logistical adjustments. They represent a declining presence of America in Europe's travel mindset. Fewer routes mean fewer business ties, fewer cultural exchanges, fewer personal connections. The US risks slowly vanishing from Europe's imagination, not because of any single event, but because of the steady accumulation of frustration and disappointment. What's most alarming, no one in power seems to be reversing course. US tourism boards remain focused on short-term marketing campaigns instead of systemic reform. Immigration procedures remain clunky and adversarial. Airport investments lag behind global standards. And with no clear recovery strategy in place, more airlines may soon follow Lufthansa and Air France in shrinking their US footprint. In the world of aviation, the worst-case scenario is not when planes are grounded. It's when destinations are quietly removed from the radar. That's what's happening now. Not because the United States is closed, but because the rest of the world no longer sees it as a priority. The skies are still open. The seats are still there. But the passengers, they're flying somewhere else. You'd think the crisis was limited to international visitors, that the empty airports, the vanishing airlines, and the silent departures were just foreign reactions to a changing America. But that's only half the story. The other half is far more unsettling because now even American airlines are withdrawing from America. JetBlue, once hailed as the airline for the people, has made one of the most dramatic domestic route reductions in recent memory. In 2025 alone, the carrier eliminated service to 15 US airports, including cities like Syracuse, Worcester, Kansas City, and Fresno. These weren't temporary cuts. These were full exits. For thousands of travelers across the country, JetBlue's departure didn't just mean inconvenience, it meant isolation. The ripple effects are devastating. In states like Maine, Kentucky, Idaho, and West Virginia, residents now have to drive 4 to 6 hours just to catch a reasonably priced flight. In some towns, commercial air service no longer exists at all. The skies have become silent, not because people aren't flying, but because no one's coming for them. And JetBlue isn't alone. United Airlines, a symbol of American connectivity for over 90 years, has quietly announced it will withdraw from more than 30 domestic routes in 2025. The cuts are aimed squarely at the country's heartland places like Iowa, Missouri, Nebraska, South Dakota, and nearly all of Wisconsin. In Springfield, Illinois, once the proud hometown of Abraham Lincoln United, has suspended all routes. In Fargo, North Dakota, the airport now sits eerily quiet on weekends. The airline's explanation: low profitability, staffing shortages, high fuel costs. The message is clear: if you're not a big city, you don't make the cut. The numbers are staggering. FAA data shows that 38% of America's small airports have had their daily flights slashed by half or more in the last year. Nearly 200 flights a month have been removed by United alone. And while that might not mean much to travelers in New York or Los Angeles, it's a devastating blow to communities that rely on those routes for survival. Think about it. These flights aren't just for vacations. They're lifelines. They connect rural patients to specialist hospitals. They carry students to universities. They bring grandparents to weddings and funerals. In agricultural states, they move products, workers, and ideas. When those flights disappear, opportunity disappears with them. And the damage doesn't stop there. Contour Airlines and Silver Airways, two of the last remaining carriers dedicated to serving small underserved cities, have also joined the retreat. In June 2025, Contour pulled out of 13 small towns across the South and Midwest. Silver followed suit, eliminating all routes in Appalachia and the Florida Panhandle. In total, more than 28 cities lost all commercial air service in a matter of months. No JetBlue, no United, no regional carriers, just empty runways and boarded-up gates. Why is this happening? Experts point to a perfect storm: high fuel prices up 41% since 2022, chronic labor shortages, outdated airport infrastructure, and most crucially, a lack of federal support. Government subsidies for rural air service, once protected under programs like the Essential Air Service (EAS), are being cut. Small-town routes aren't profitable, and without subsidies, airlines have no financial incentive to keep them alive. But this isn't just about economics. It's about who gets to participate in the American promise. Because when flights are stripped away from rural and working-class communities, the divide between urban and non-urban America widens. In cities, people hop on a flight to DC for a meeting or Miami for a weekend. In towns left behind, people now drive 8 hours for a doctor's appointment or miss funerals because they can't afford the journey. This is the new geography of exclusion. And make no mistake, it's political. Airports are physical symbols of belonging. When the last plane leaves and no one replaces it, it sends a clear message: you don't matter enough to stay connected. And in a country already fractured by class, region and ideology, that message carries weight. The irony: this isn't happening because of a foreign threat. It's not caused by terrorism, natural disaster or global collapse. It's a conscious, calculated decision by corporations, enabled by policy stagnation and ignored by those in power. A retired JetBlue pilot from Ohio put it best: "I've flown into small towns where people came to the airport just to wave at the plane. Now those planes don't land anymore, and the towns feel forgotten." So what happens now? Businesses in those towns struggle. Students rethink college options. Seniors stay home instead of visiting grandkids. Regional economies slow down. Healthcare becomes harder to reach. And a country that once prided itself on mobility and connection becomes a land of disconnection. America was built on the idea that anyone, anywhere, could go anywhere else. That geography wouldn't be destiny. That opportunity wasn't just for cities with skyscrapers, but for cornfields, deserts and mountain valleys too. That idea is fading. If major airlines like United and JetBlue, with massive fleets and federal partnerships, are pulling out of Middle America, what chance do smaller carriers have? What happens to the dream of one nation indivisible if the skies no longer connect us? This is no longer just a story about tourism. It's a story about identity, about who gets access, who gets left behind, and who is slowly being erased from the national map. In the aviation industry, the ultimate death sentence isn't a crash, it's being forgotten. And right now, hundreds of towns across America are vanishing from the sky.